Hello, and thank you for joining today's edition of the Signal Media webinar series. I'm Howard Wahlberg, correspondent for AFCEA International's Signal Media. Modern warfare concepts, such as JADC2, are all about information dominance. Video and audio data are the virtual eyes and ears of mission-critical command and control centers, combat information centers, briefing rooms, and operations centers. A highly secure and hyperscalable AV over IP video distribution system is mission critical amidst an environment of increasing cyber, geopolitical, and pandemic threats. Being able to securely distribute ultra-high definition video, audio, KVM, USB, and control rapidly and efficiently is paramount to mission success. In today's webinar, sponsored by PESA, we'll discuss the need for advanced secure VDS systems, detailed use cases including C2, DC2, VTC, CIC, watch floors, and more. How your VDS system can meet the needs of today's and tomorrow's missions, and how to determine if your VDS is secure enough to protect from external and insider cyber threats. Joining me today to take on these challenges will be Brigadier General Skip Vincent, United States Air Force retired, Chairman and founder of Soft Power Solutions, LLC, and its parent company, the Hawaii Pacific Foundation, a native Hawaiian organization and the holding company of Echelon Services, a PESA channel partner. General Vincent retired from 37 years of military service as an active duty member of the Hawaii Air National Guard. General Vincent also served 5 combat tours and held various command and staff positions at the Pentagon, Hawaii State Headquarters, as well as in the field. During his last military assignment, he served as mobilization assistant to the Director of Strategy and Policy, U.S. Pacific Command, shaping and maintaining regional security. General Vincent is a leader and advocate of science and technology's role towards addressing global security issues, including evaluating technologies. He also chaired the Pacific Command's Science and Technology International Affairs Panel, a singular multi-agency venue designed to address possible solutions to transnational challenges. Also with us is Dennis Defensor, Vice President at PESA. Mr. Defensor has over 25 years' experience in U.S. federal government and SLED IT contracts. He has held executive management and technical leadership positions at CloudShield, SAIC, Acoma, DLT Solutions, GTSI, Falcon Microsystems, Teraglyph, and Viacom New Media. He has published Harnessing the Power of the Industrial Internet for Government through Government Computer News, and he holds a patent for a method and system for an active cell rendering engine, including a web server, a rendering engine, an application layer, and a data layer. In addition to his extensive IT, cloud, and cybersecurity experience, Dennis also holds a JD degree. And finally, available for your questions, Scott Barella, CTO of PESA. Mr. Barella has been involved in the broadcast industry for over 30 years with a strong background in systems design and architecture, OEM design, systems integration, and operations with particular emphasis on IP video. He also served as the Deputy Chairman of the Technical Working Group of the Alliance for IP Media Solutions and was active in the SMPTE 32NF60DG group where the SMPTE ST2110 standard was drafted and published. This webinar is approved for 1 CertNexus continuing education credit for cybersecurity first responders, and it's also approved for 1 JIAC CPE. As always, please feel free to submit questions at any time during this discussion by using the Ask a Question box on your webinar console. We're going to have plenty of time for your questions at the conclusion of our panel discussion. Please also note that we have resources available for you to download at your convenience by clicking the Resources tab. One final bit of housekeeping. All of the slides will be sent to all registered attendees for this webinar shortly after the webinar is completed. Look for an email from PESA. With that, I will turn it over to General Skip Vincent, who will kick off our discussion. Skip, go ahead.
Oh, good day, everybody, and thank you, PESA, for hosting this webinar. As you mentioned, I retired from the U.S. Air Force with a lot of time in the National Guard, going back and forth, and founded the Hawaii Pacific Foundation because I ended up going back to help support DoD and state or security cooperation in other areas. Echelon is one of our companies that supports this effort also. But what we're here today is to address the warfighter's needs. That's a very difficult task without some perspective and insight. And again, I'm going to give you one person's perspective. My perspective comes from years of operational experience to include operational deployments and combat tours. And my focus today will be on information warfare, information dominance, especially how difficult it's become over the years. I'll share my insights and views in the next few minutes, and I hope you find it successful. So a little background here. The 1980s, ancient history for some and just yesterday for me, it seems. A man named John Walker, you might have heard of, worked for the Navy. He also ensured that his sons would enlist and follow in his footsteps. The only problem is his footsteps involved schemes to sell secrets to the Soviets to get rich. He was a crypto specialist with access to volumes and volumes of DoD crypto keys. He sold them to the Soviets for years, and with those keys, the Soviets could virtually read every message that the military and the State Department sent out, including up to top secret. I was at the Pentagon during this time and feeling the impact of what he had done. We had become so conditioned that when the Russians showed up in our exercises or they sidestepped some of our Cold War operations, we thought really nothing of it. Figured they were guessing really well. But this breach, when it was discovered, is arguably the most damaging insider threat incident in the history of the U.S. We compared it to our ability to break the codes of Enigma during World War II for the Nazis, or the Japanese codes that allowed us to succeed in Midway and go forward throughout the Pacific. It was devastating, and it was a wake-up call. It caused an instant learning curve, big time. We basically trusted a system with virtually no protocols. The integrity of the system relied on people with clearances and that they're flawless and honest. And right after that, we started establishing those protocols and processes to compartmentalize it. And I could only imagine what it would have been like, the damage would have been like if Walker had access to the kind of technology we have today to process information. I'm going to go over a couple of things real quick. Also in the 80s, the Goldwater-Nichols Act restructured and redefined U.S. military command structure. And this is going to be important to the discussion I have in a couple of minutes. In the Goldwater-Nichols Act, we separated operational command given to geographic commanders and specific commanders, and roles of the separate branches of the armed forces to train, organize, and equip. It structured our military operational doctrine, and in my opinion, paved the way for efficiencies that include information operations and what we know today as information dominance. See, warfare has become more complex because of many of the broad and specific, for a lot of broad and specific reasons. We became very efficient and effective at warfighting. Each combatant commander shares the same theater campaign plan and structure, which ensures kind of a proper focus on our military strategies. But we began to realize the complex task of shaping the theater was just as powerful as the technology. In fact, I was asked to come up to Pacific Command specifically to help develop doctrine because I was one of many really smart people, not to say I'm all that smart, to get involved in shaping operations and how does the military get involved in shaping. Shaping basically has two military objectives. We want to shape perceptions and influence behavior. And the term cognitive warfare, if you want to look that up, comes into being. Shaping had a vital role through the entire spectrum of operations, whether it be active warfare or security cooperation. One instance, when I arrived in Afghanistan 3 months after 9/11 and commanded a large base in the southern part of that country. Now, though this was my 5th combat tour, it was the most active and most close-up I've ever experienced. The relationships we built with the local Pashtuns um, were actually as effective, if not more, than all the firepower that I had at my fingertips. They were also pretty smart. I asked them for a favor, and this favor was to tell us what they thought we were up to. Can you see what we're doing and predict what we're up to? And as good as our OPSEC was, they figured us out pretty quick. This was their home. Anything that looked different, they examined. All they needed was a little information to connect the dots to predict our responses and our actions pretty accurately. So I kind of guess we weren't all that bright after all. But based on their feedback, we were able to take measures that effectively masked our operations most of the time from the enemy. Some of these actions including hiding our sensors, strict need-to-know policies, because people talk, especially the young troops. We also took actions to mask or misdirect our movements. And this is important to apply to the technology today. See, I've always been an advocate that technology is an enabler. It doesn't provide the solutions, but it enables us to get to those solutions. I'm going to make sure I'm clicking these slides the same way here. My focus is going to be on information operations. And over the years, there's been a definite shift. Traditionally, we're focusing on enemy units or commanders. We want to affect their information and want to defend our information systems. Remember I talked about complexity. Well, we began to learn, fortunately, ahead of the power curve, sometimes, unfortunately, hard lessons. We found that a whole of government community approach to be really effective across the whole spectrum of warfare, like the example I just mentioned in building a relationship with Pashtuns. And it's not just peacetime to influence brinksmanship or avoid conflict, and for any exit strategies. Enemy units and commanders, the shift is become broader to include individuals and groups and influencers, internal and external. And sometimes these influencers or these groups don't even know how much they're affecting our information operations, and we need to understand that. However, we think this allows us to equip our troops with the tools they need and to really enhance our situational awareness. You can't look at everything and be aware of your situation, your battlefield. You need to know what to look at. You need to know what to focus on. In February 2002, I sat and watched an operation go down real time, Operation Anaconda. We had a tremendous technology advantage against the enemy, but it still fell short on the battlefield. The battle was, many of you might know, was nicknamed the Battle of Roberts Ridge. The special ops team was, in a bad way, dire straits. And since it has been declassified, but through a CIA predator, we could watch the entire battle. However, we did not have the ability to pass this information to the troops except by radio. And it got very complex and very confusing if we start interrupting the troops in their ability to interface and to engage the enemy. If the video were available to them, and this is a lot of discussion we had when it was going on, we think we would have lost much fewer people, and the situational awareness of each individual and each of the units would have been so much higher. A Chinook helicopter that was trying to come in a quick response was shot down. Again, they didn't have a lot of situational awareness, and 7 dozen of our troops were pinned down in a severe crossfire. The quick response team had less than desirable situational awareness, and although we could give them some information, and we had the information, we couldn't deliver it to them in an effective manner. And this is one of our Air Force combat controllers received the Medal of Honor posthumously during this particular battle. Those of us who watched the firefight in real time were profoundly affected. If you can put yourself in our position, knowing what's going on, seeing it, but not getting the information of the troops, and watching many of these troops go down one by one, was a difficult thing to watch. Now, if you want to look at that, the Predator video is released and is now on YouTube, and it's interesting to look at. It's been sanitized, but it still gives you the gist of what happened. Now, since then, we've been able to deliver real-time video to the troops on the ground. It's made a huge difference. This kind of situational awareness to the battlefield is a critical aspect of information operations. You know, we talked about street smart adversaries and a little bit of an insider threats. It's worth mentioning unintended disclosures. It really is. Sometimes it's egos. Sometimes it's just not knowing what's important, what isn't, or just take for granted or being complacent. Unintended disclosures go hand in hand with street smart adversaries. If you remember, we engaged the Pashtuns to see if they could tell what we were up to. Well, the Taliban is just as smart, and the enemy is just as smart in that area. They're able to connect the dots also. So we had to, I kind of look at unintentional disclosures as insider threat. And I know I could cite a bunch of examples, but I think you have the gist of it. But I think lack of understanding, training, and egos seem to be the issues that I've had experience with. Now, protocols within the technology and policies seem to mitigate, but they don't eliminate. Awareness and vigilance is essential. And you know, many of us who have security clearances have gotten increased training over the past few years on insider threats. Awareness seems to be, in my opinion, the best way to avoid that. But one of the enablers, again, is technology. How do we use technology to create these protocols, compartmentalization, and the ability to get the information to who needs it and protecting it at the same time? The insider threat issue got very personal, and I'm now allowed to share this with this group. When I was the assistant for strategy and policy at Pacific Command, I was responsible for our China strategy. The staff officer that was assigned to advise me was a longtime China expert. He was a retired colonel, GS-15 with a top secret SCI clearance. I trusted him. One day when we were at the Pentagon, he didn't show up. And I got a call later on by, I believe it was OSI or NCIS, one of the two. He was arrested for espionage. He was found guilty of providing information to the Chinese. But that was, to be perfectly candid, I was really pissed off. I couldn't believe that, quote, I fell for this. And it got really, really personal. But the thing is that, you know, what we learned from that, and what I want to pass on is that we can't flinch and bring work to a standstill because we fear or we're afraid that somebody is a spy. It really is a case of finding technology and protocols to secure the data and mitigate that threat. If we try to do it on our own, if we try to live with this fear and not press on with the processes, work comes to a standstill, and it's just as bad. So that's some of the things that we experience, and that's some of the solutions that I've come up, I've been presented with and implemented in my service has been technology. Now, again, those of you who had clearances and seen training in recent years, it asks you to take precautions and develop habits that reduce the likelihood of compromise. And it also talks about some of the attributes of insider threats. Making systems more secure and moving forward is really the answer here. So what I've done is I've shared some of my insights, and the important points I really want to make is that technology won't solve the problems, but it will enable us to solve these problems. We need to understand what the enemy sees. We need to understand our weaknesses, and we need to employ and integrate them into the technology that we have. The operational effectiveness and efficiencies created by gold, water, nickels allows our services to blend quite a bit more. Matter of fact, the technologies that I've seen and that you will see in some of these briefings, although they're given a different name, air battle management for the Air Force, Operation, I think, Overreach, I believe that's the Army, but they're all the same. They're integrated, and the requirements are meeting the requirements of the warfighter. The challenge, this is really just a summary or a paraphrasing of information dominance doctrine. Mission impact, cybersecurity, and efficiencies. And sometimes, depending on the position you're in, it could be a phenomenal impact. And I've had good training, I've had good people advising me. And one thing that was interesting was when I retired, one of the reasons I started this foundation was I kept getting asked to come back and train new general officers and speak at National Defense University and other areas. I spoke at the Myanmar Peace Center to introduce some of the concepts to them and supported the Pakistan floods in 2011. Well, PACOM, the Pacific Command, sent me to Taiwan. They wanted a general officer's assessment of what went on. And during that time, by treaty or by policy, we weren't allowed to send active duty generals to Taiwan. But they could send me as a retired. I got a really nice gift. The gift was a thumb drive with a laser and a flashlight. And when I came back, I turned it right into the J6 and the Chief Information Officer. And of course, I got it back about 30 days later. And they said, oh yeah, they found all kinds of bugs and all kinds of viruses that would have allowed them to tap into our SIPRNet if I stuck it in the computer or the nipper. And they were glad I didn't do that. Second, I said, can you clean that thing out? Says, no, there's no way we can clean that out. We just pulled the whole thing out, put a brand new thumb drive in there for you. So a bit of a chuckle there, but from there, we asked somebody to develop some protocols to help us block that kind of thing. We need to take a look at some of these lessons learned, how we're doing business, and how we go forward with applying this technology. Remember, information warfare, information operations, the technology there is a limited resource. As a warfighter, I'm looking at logistics, for example. Where do I place the logistics? Where do I place the nodes to get the resources to the troops or the supporting organizations that need it? Well, just because information warfare and our type of technology is transmitted by a satellite or over landlines or whatever, doesn't mean it's an unlimited resource. We need to shape it, and we need to understand what the mission is. And that was the role I played, is to explain what the mission's all about, what we're trying to accomplish. And the role some of the smart folks played that supported me and the team of technology was amazing. So learn what the requirements are, what the situation is, what the threats are, and then apply the kind of technology you need. Video technology is critical. Understanding how to deploy it and getting to the troops is absolutely essential. And if I could leave you with one example, prior to the first 9 years of service was actually in the Army. I was a grunt soldier, infantry, and one of the best assignments I have as a buck sergeant was a squad leader. And when we're moving forward and we engage the enemy, if my squad was in the lead, we would lay suppressive fire, we would do our jobs, and the squad behind would maneuver around to position on the enemy. I would watch them, they would watch me. Once they set up to start suppressive fire, I would start maneuvering against enemy positions, and another squad coming behind as reserve to watch what's going on. We all had visuals on each other. And with this visual and with what's going on and how we would see the enemy, we could apply our training. Now I go back to Operation Anaconda. These guys could not see the enemy. We could. They were highly trained, highly skilled. They could not apply all of their training to take advantage of that training in their equipment because they didn't have that situational awareness. So this is why I think that the audio-visual feeds that the troops receive and that you're able to provide is absolutely essential. So with that, I'm giving you a perspective, and it just boils down to this summary statement on information dominance. So I'm going to be around to answer questions that you might have or ask for any more insights. Dennis, I think you're the next briefer. I turn the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, General Vincent. And again, we thank you for your service.
Welcome. Thank you.
My name is Dennis Defensor from PESA. And after hearing what General Vincent mentioned, I'm becoming more excited about sharing with you some information about JADC2 and information dominance. We'll address the challenges and we'll talk about the opportunities of this amazing concept. The Joint All-Domain Command and Control, or JADC2, is purely a war-fighting concept. Now, if you have to pick two verbs to describe what JADC2 is all about, two words, sense and act. JADC2 will connect all the sensors of all 6 military branches, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force into a single network. It will use a military cloud to share intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance data to make quicker and better decisions. It will be assisted by human intelligence and artificial intelligence to identify the targets and recommend the optimal weapon to engage the target. A simple example might be an Air Force drone might sense the target, but optimally an Army weapon will probably have to engage. To a certain degree, this already occurs in the joint commands, but JADC2 is much broader and more encompassing than what's happening now. A microcosm of this was this slide that was shown by the Army a few years ago to show their concept about how they were going to use sensors or IoT, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. In the new battlefield, which the Army projects is happening in the next few years, they're projecting up to 1 million sensors per square kilometer of battlefield. And the concept really changes when they said Think of the tank, the battle tank, as a moving and firing sensor. It changes a lot of things because now we have to sense, fix, sustain, collaborate, defend, communicate, and attack with this very tight matrix of information. Information dominance is the strategic layer of JADC2. The main components of information dominance are information warfare, command and control, and intelligence. JADC2 is the execution layer, the all-domain warfighting concept in land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. And in JADC2, the major components are DataCentricity, scalability, interoperability, and security, with a strong emphasis on zero trust. JADC2 will also federate the implementations happening now at the three major branches: the Air Force ABMS, Advanced Battle Management System, the Army's Project Convergence, and the Navy's Project Oversight. These technologies under the three branches include satellite constellation, DoD Cloud and DoD Cloud Edge, command and control systems, sensor IoT, artificial intelligence, automation, cryptology, encryption, cybersecurity, both inside and outside threats, DevSecOps, 5G, and SDN. The stakeholders are mainly the US DoD and US Intel, US DHS, our coalition partners and allies, and the Five Eyes: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the US. So that is the breadth of JADC2. Excuse me. Excuse me 1 second. Information dominance is a 20-year-old concept defined as a degree of information superiority which allows the possessor to use information and capabilities to achieve an operational advantage in a conflict to control situation, in an operation short of war, while denying those capabilities to the adversary. JADC2 is happening as we speak. On May 13th, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved the strategy document for JADC2. A few days before that, May 5th, 2021, Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks released the memorandum on data centricity with 5 data decrees and the vaultless concept of data specifications. Data must be visible, accessible, understandable, linked, and trustworthy, interoperable, and secure. And Lieutenant General Dennis Creel mentioned that we are finding ourselves now in the first phase of the implementation plan. This is where JADC2 becomes real. On September 8th, a few days ago, J6, Deputy Director of the Cross-Functional Chair, Brigadier General Robert Walker, said the DoD is weeks away from finalizing the implementation plan of JADC2, and it will be classified. The video distribution system is essentially the eyes and ears of JADC2. The VDS are the eyes and ears across all domains, from sea, land, air, space, and cyberspace, and it makes video data a critical data in this battlefield environment. It must follow the voltage concept. It must be visible, accessible, understandable, linked, trustworthy, interoperable, and secure. And these are the elements that need to happen within that domain. Now, PACE Secure VDS fulfills this mission for the video data needed by command and control centers. The command and control centers are the main use cases for a VDS, but this also includes briefing rooms, operation centers, watch centers, and even interview rooms. A good example is the VTC, or the video teleconference system. With the current situation with the pandemic, with the environment that we have now of needing to federate the different groups and organizations, VTC becomes very critical in areas that include confidential meetings, continuity of operations, and situational awareness. The traditional SDI platform of VTC, the old technology, is no longer viable because it cannot encrypt the data, it cannot scale, it cannot secure the information. So the challenge has to be met by an AV over IP solution that's secure in all aspects of it and reduces all the inefficiencies and dramatically improves performance that's needed by the control centers to be able to see what's happening and hear what's happening on the field. The other use case is CIC, which is the Navy's version of the command and control center. Now, this is where a very critical aspect of the VDS becomes important. We do not just need to distribute the data within the same building or location. The new VDS must be able to perform in a distributed command and control model, meaning that it is not dependent on one location, but the participants of a command and control center can be in multiple locations. It could be in a local center, it could be on a separate ship, different location, any place in the world. It's got to be distributed to allow us to maintain a continuity of operation. One of the main problems during the pandemic was it was very difficult to convene a command and control center when 3 or 4 of the participants had COVID. And that had to change a lot of things. So this use case of having a distributed command and control center is so critical to what we're doing now. Again, from in all domains, the localized command and control center and the distributed command and control center becomes extremely needed. When you put them on the cloud, and the edge of the cloud, the spectrum of what can be achieved is tremendous. So again, not only do you have to be working on the cloud, you got to be on Kubernetes or a container to get you out to the edge of the cloud. So when you're looking for the needed command and control, VDS, video distribution system for the eyes and ears of a command and control center, you have to look at the list of very critical specifications. Allow me to walk through that. AV over IP makes it more secure and more scalable. For interoperability, you need open cybersecure architecture and COTS components, and support for the open source community, and it needs to follow the DevSecOps framework. It needs to have AES 256-bit encryption with dynamic keys and mutual authentication for the certificates. The solution has to be certified at the FIPS 140-2 level by DODEN, APL, NEAP, common criteria, and it must pass TAA. it must be 100% compliant with CNSA Suite B, and it has to operate in a zero trust environment. More than that, it needs to be able to real-time programmable shift distribution from classified to unclassified, creating air gaps where needed. It has to go through cross domains for distribution from one user to a user group to an area or a broader enclave. It needs to be cloud ready, preferably in Kubernetes, which has been picked by DoD for the container aspect of it. It has to be able to deliver video, audio, USB, KVM, CAC token technologies, delivering live encrypted 4K throughput video, and all the way up going through copper or fiber. Low latency, and it has to meet the current requirements of the cybersecurity executive order. All these aspects are met by PESA. PESA Secure, the VDS system that we produce, hits all the specifications needed for the modern command and control center, which will be embodied in JADC2. Thank you, everybody. We're now going to the question and answer session of the program. So, Howard.
Well, thank you, Dennis and Skip, for an absolutely fascinating look at this very, very complex landscape. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of people wanting to take a look at Secura. We do have a few minutes left for some question and answers. Scott is going to be joining this part of the webinar to answer any technical questions that the audience may come up with. While we are teeing up our audience questions, I just want to remind everyone that to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question tab on the webinar console. It does look like we have a couple of questions ready already. The first one teed up is directed to General Vincent. Sir, what do you see as the biggest threat to achieving information dominance?
You know, I used to try to find what that biggest threat is. You know, I talked about the battlefield and what's going on with it, and a lot of it is very unique. But if I had to boil it down to one thing, I had mentioned cognitive warfare earlier in my talk, and that's where our thoughts and our perceptions, sometimes they say the human mind becomes a battlefield. You know, the aim is to change not only what people think and how they act, but if you wage it successfully, it shapes and influences the enemy and your own troops. So one of the interesting things about information warfare is you can be your own enemy if you're not careful. One of the things that we had done is we had seen how, and this is a particular case in Afghanistan, how enemy forces would respond to what we do, and we would watch that. And after a while, they started feeling like they were getting ahead of the game. So that's great. We'll let them keep thinking they're winning until it's time. And then when it was time, we were able to devastate them. We were able to shape their thoughts and what they're thinking. And it was, so I would say the biggest threat, it's very difficult to say what that biggest threat is, but I think the cognitive warfare part of it is one of the first things we have to address. And the other part.
So interesting, sir.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then of course the other part of it, which just kind of came to mind, is being overwhelmed in the information dominance arena. If the adversary has more, is technologically parity with us, overwhelming us with their bandwidth and overwhelming us with information and misinformation is very is a threat, only because of today's you know, in this world of abbreviated thought and social media, we seem to accept things that we see put before us. before really taking a look at what the truth, how accuracy is, and any kind of due diligence. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I definitely these are the things I think about when I'm looking at threat to my information operations.
Sir, I think you did an outstanding job in answering that question. And there's the next one is sort of a follow-on, especially when we talk about the weaponization of dis and misinformation. I'll throw this out to the both of you. It's not addressed to anyone in particular, but I suspect, General Vincent, we may want to harken back to some of your comments about insider threats, because that is, in fact, the question. We hear more and more about insider threats these days. How can these solutions help deter these types of threats?
If you don't mind me stepping in here, first, the most effective solution is awareness and training. We just need to understand that. And when we determine what some of the processes and protocols to protect that data, that information, that data is so huge. There's so much volume of it. We need to figure out an electronic method to compartmentalize and secure it. I've seen it done very successfully. You know, the very oldest technologies I've seen is HAVQuick, for example, HAVQuick radios over frequency hopping that allows real-time dialogue, and at the same time, very difficult for the enemy to jam or even listen in on. So I think that the insider threat issue needs to be our awareness, discovering how people are getting things, getting by us, and applying fixes to them. This individual that I trusted, that I called a friend, and I can't tell you what DoD implemented after that, but we ended up implementing more technology to compartmentalize and to be able to discover violations to security protocols. So secure video is one, compartmentalizing the other. Again, I don't know if I answered the question right, but I really think that the most important part of it is our training and our awareness and bringing issues to surface so we can address them.
Howard, this is Dennis.
Outstanding, sir.
Howard, from a technology perspective, one of the missing elements now in the current technology of VDS is that SDI platform is not encrypted. It cannot be encrypted. So the AV over IP technology is definitely critical for command and control, so that the information does not just flow into any outlet. And on top of that, what Joel Vincent said, you should have the authentication process nailed down. And on top of that, you need also to direct the right level of security in terms of the flow of data directed to the participant of a command and control who may have different clearance classifications, and be able to air gap these things. So the flexibility that is offered by AV over IP is just beyond what can be done now by the current SDI technology.
Yeah, this is Scott Borrello. You haven't heard my my voice yet, so it may be like, who is this guy, right? I'm the CTO for PESA and the architect, the chief architect for Secura. And I think insider threat is kind of where we started. We have been using traditional methods to distribute video for decades. We've been very keenly aware of how video works, having our systems in the Olympics and all sorts of commercial pieces and parts. But in military, we noticed that it was fairly loose with respect to signals in general. And I think that there was a need to shore that up. Dennis mentioned SDI. That's an acronym for Serial Digital Interface. It's a baseband sort of video, much like HDMI, which is a consumer video format. SDI, Serial Digital Interface, is a professional video format. But both are similar in the sense that they're open. And when we talk about insider threats, that means the ability to take those signals and take them as hostage goes to the heart of what the general was talking about, in that you think you have somebody you can trust, but you really don't. So I thought the first thing that we should approach or should tackle is the ability to take that video and encrypt it, such that if you needed to transport it, which is kind of our business, you need to do that securely, and you can't really do that using traditional old-style baseband signals. You need to figure out a way to move them around effectively, and I think insider threats is kind of the heartbeat of the testing procedures at Fort Huachuca for us vendors, to make sure that the intended audience of you is authorized to see what you want to see. Now, there's a lot more to it, as you might imagine, but the heart of it is still insider threat.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome aboard. This is a perfect segue to the next question. So we've talked about how this data gets moved and captured, but how do you know that a system is in fact secure enough to protect from insider and external threats? Are there special, like a certified stamp to look for?
Yep. So we have the wonderful agencies like the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, to help us around with some of the encryption standards, such as FIPS 140-2. There's lots of numbers and acronyms, as you might expect. This is government, so it's no exception to the rule. But there are standards that are suggested that we have to have, and not so much as a suggestion, they're requirements, right? And for good reason. These are strong enough encryption standards that the vendors need to adhere to. One of which is the base crypto piece. The other piece is how the keys and so forth are used. The Walker incident that General Vincent had outlined in his section of this webinar is interesting to me. And how do you prevent that? And I think it's not just a VDS system that can do that. There are tons more pieces around that everybody took for granted. This person was accredited and so forth. So I don't think I'm going to have any more around that. But there are other protocols that went into effect, as he had mentioned, and I think this is just another piece that we're wanting to add to this, so that it's important to know that a video distribution system is a distribution system. I'm not a vendor who actually acquires that video in the sense that I have the video maker in the drone, or I have a video camera on the field of battle. Those are all held tightly with the enclave, whether it be the Army forces or the Air Force or the Navy or whoever might be involved in the battlefield. Those video pieces are acquired and accumulated to put into an environment where officers can see what's going on. And then it's my job as the vendor of the video distribution system to make sure that video gets to the intended recipient, whoever's the specialist in munitions, whoever's the specialist in the battlefield conditions, or the specialist in logistics and the information they need to see in an instant moment. That means that my VDS is not connected to a SIPR nipper, and for good reason. This goes to, geez, you wanted to take over and be everything. No, there are pieces and parts that have to have autonomy, such that I'm responsible to make sure that officers get proper information quickly. And part of that is the encryption pieces of the video, which has never been done before. Not in this sense, right?
So Scott, right lasering into that, we did discuss the Walker incident and those crypto keys that were sold. And apologies if you began to answer this question. How is encryption and key management different today?
Well, I think the key management piece and the crypto has been around for a long time. I think it's now the intention to enforce that we're using it. And I think that's been overlooked, frankly. If you look at some of the, and I won't say phony accreditation, but we have our own games we play, and I think it's unfair to look at everyone to say, hey, you didn't follow the rules. But I think there's a lot of gamesmanship in the market that I see having come into this, and the enforcement of good old-fashioned cryptography is key to how we do this. Right? It's been around for a long time, but there's multi-factor authentication. There's all sorts of dimensions to this piece, but the idea that a signal such as video, which has been a baseband form for decades, is finally coming into the IP arena. It means that it can be transported to places we don't want it. And so having it encrypted properly, having it decrypted with the proper key management, et cetera, using the elliptical keys and Diffie-Hellman techniques that have been around for a long time, are finally being enforced in areas that we didn't really think we had to be paying attention to. But if we move these video elements into the IP arena, this becomes a whole different actionable piece, right? So we have to be very careful about the video that we're converting to Internet protocol. And not that it's going to end up on the Internet, but the IP protocol in general means it's an IP packet now. And I need to encrypt that packet and then transport that packet securely. That means I have to pay attention to all the rules, not just part of the rules, all the rules.
Fascinating. Thank you, Scott. We've got about 3 minutes to go, so I have time for a couple more questions, maybe. Next one's queued up for General Vincent. Sir, when you were deployed, what was the biggest obstacle to sending and receiving the information you needed? And do you think that has changed, and if so, how?
The biggest obstacle was poor planning. I mentioned how someone needs to pay attention to logistics and the plans, and then you get the right information, or you get the right resources in the right place so that your troops can be fed, have water, have ammunition, that type of thing. One of the things that early on, and there's still a bit of a mindset here, is that just because it's transmitted by satellite or electronically, that it's an unlimited resource. That's not true. It takes people to analyze it. It takes people to think through, what do you need? You can pass on information to me, and I just have information overload and not be able to use it. So one of the obstacles, again, I'm looking more internally right now, is to understand the needs of the warfighter, tailor that information, and transmit it and get feedback. And one of the other things that I also look at is I always try to identify who has a stake in my organization's success or failure, and let's say on the battlefield. And if they are responding to all of my operations, then something's going on here. And sure enough, I will find where a simple thing like there's a couple of folks may have made friends in the local village, and the kids will come to the front gate every day to meet with this guy, give him water, candy, or whatever. So on a particular Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, nobody came up. Oh, that's because he told them that he was going to go out on a convoy. A big piece of intel, and a lot of the technology we use to protect that information just went right out the window. So and that's an insider threat, but that was unintentional. So to me is understanding, what we need to tell our troops, and planning the use of that technology so that it is concise and relevant to the particular mission, time frame, or whatever we're using to measure success.
Absolutely, sir. Well, there are several more questions. Unfortunately, we are at the top of the hour. We're going to make sure that these other questions that came in from our audience get addressed. But with that, we have concluded the time we have for question and answer. On behalf of our attendees and AFCEA's Signal Media, Brigadier General Vincent Dennis Scott, I want to express our thanks for an absolutely spot-on discussion and really, really great answers to our questions. And a big thank you to our attendees for submitting those questions. Again, for any that went unanswered, the team at PESA will follow up with you directly offline. Additionally, one more reminder, PESA will be distributing the slides from this webinar to all attendees. You can revisit this webinar on demand anytime you like, as well as view the recorded versions of previous Signal Media webinars on AFCEA's Signal Media website at www.afcea.org/signal/webinar. That concludes our Signal Media webinar sponsored by PESA. Thanks again for your participation and have a good rest of your day.